Would you feel comfortable with so many people, so many millions, supporting an idea which you're opposed to? And you're opposed to this idea with so few? Would you be comfortable? That is the problem the Ruto administration has to face. And it is difficult to see a way out. Well, so far, it looks like they have decided to use brute force of the government. And it is true, the government can be very intimidating. However, not to so many people. No way. It can be intimidating to a small group of people, or people who are not in the majority. But when you're dealing with the majority of Kenyans, you need to ask Bashir, former president of Sudan, and many other world leaders who used brute force, who felt that brute force would protect them. But found out when it was too late that it was not adequate. Because the truth and the reality of this life is that you can't fool around with several heavy gorillas charging at you. Even if you have a gun, you can't fool around. And in the same way, you can't fool around with the masses of a country, even if you have guns. This is a very simple truism that it seems the government is missing. And it is just mind-boggling that they can miss it. It is mind-boggling to think that somebody somewhere is thinking that by playing their cards the right way, by creating the right perception, by getting a few prominent people from Luo Nyanza to rubbish Raila Odinga's agenda, that they'll be able to stop these gorillas rushing at them. Wa? Kweli dunia iko na maneno. But what I want to draw your attention to is a very worrying trend that has emerged. You see, while in Kiambu, somebody threw a tear gas canister at the Azimio caravan of vehicles. And the leaders had to dive back into their vehicles to avoid the effects of the tear gas. But after things cooled down, the meeting continued. And Kalonzo Musyoka was the first to speak. And he said what was done was completely uncalled for. But I want us to focus on the possible motive. Now, let's try and think like the other side. Why would you want to throw a tear gas canister into a peaceful meeting? Every time the deputy president opens his mouth, trouble comes out. The same deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, recently threatened journalists who he accused of reporting negative stories about him and Ruto. Just hold on a minute there. We're talking about somebody holding a public office, heading a government, and his deputy. And what those people do, the actions they take, affect millions of Kenyans. And it is the work of journalists to critique everything they do. It is in the Constitution. Freedom of the media. Why would you think that those who put together a constitution would take the time to talk about freedom of speech? Targeting the media. Why? For what reason? Because it is an important component in any democracy. Every time the deputy president opens his mouth, trouble comes out. You see, the way this thing was planned out is that Ruto and his allies were waiting for Raila to make his move immediately after the election results were announced. And they had their plans in place. They had several plays ready, waiting for Raila. But Raila didn't turn up. The much anticipated violent protests countrywide never took place. And instead, the whistleblower manenos came to the forefront almost 4 months later. When Ruto handlers had relaxed, they had no plans in place, they were caught completely unawares. All they could do were useless damage control efforts, like storming the IEBC to try and find out where the leak came from, to try and identify the whistleblowers. But of course they were too late, because the whistleblowers had already been evacuated. Where government has been so determined to provoke the people. When people want to relax, when people want to look the other way and try to deal with their hardships, they provoke. When Kenyans are attacking maneno mingi, they provoke. Tell me another place anywhere in the world where government has been so determined kuchokoza wananchi. In fact, in my view, things are so bad in Kenya today that if Raila Odinga were to succumb to pressure, because Baba has confessed, he has let it out, that is under considerable pressure from within and outside the country to postpone the Monday demonstrations. But things are so bad that if Raila were to abandon those demonstrations today, it would be worse, because it would be taken over by the people. And Raila Odinga would be kwisha maneno politically.